Well, good evening. I want to welcome you all to our special seminar this weekend. It's a little early, maybe on a Friday evening. We were getting started a little bit late, but we were waiting for a few more people to come. I think 6:30 is hard to get out on a Friday night, but we are so thankful that you made the journey, and I think you're going to be rewarded as we go through this weekend. My name's Rob Neal, and we just want to welcome you to our program. It's on reversing depression and damaged relationships and disease, and I know you're going to be blessed. I first met Dr. Sandoval when I went to Uchee Pines. That is a lifestyle center that deals with reversing diabetes and all sorts of chronic diseases, and dealing with it with a holistic approach on how to heal the causes, the root causes, not just treat the symptoms. And my wife and I and my family, when my children were little, we went there, and he had just arrived, I believe, and we're so thankful. He was the medical director there for a while. I was just going to briefly introduce him. We were going to sing a song and have prayer and tell you what's coming down the pike for the rest of the program. But Dr. Sandoval is a board-certified ER physician, and he also is a board-certified lifestyle physician. Now, that is a fairly new field of medicine. In 2017, they had the first cohort of physicians that were trained and sat the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine test. And he was in that first cohort of about 200, and you said, 216 or something like that, physicians. Now there's thousands of them, but the first set that became board-certified lifestyle medicine. So he has an extensive background, not only in critical care with ER, but also specifically in dealing with those lifestyle issues that really is almost 80% of the diseases that Americans face. More lifestyle related than it is critical care. But he comes from both sides of the perspective, so if you have any questions, he'll be around over the weekend. You can also talk to him, and then I know you'll be blessed by the presentation tonight that is where disease really comes from, that he will be presenting for us. We will be having a seminar tomorrow morning at 9:30. There's also one at 11, and then there's going to be there's going to be a meal, fellowship meal, that you're welcome to enjoy here in our fellowship hall for lunch tomorrow. And then we have a presentation tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 rather, and then another one at 4 o'clock. Tomorrow mornings, Why Do I Take Things Personally? At 9:30, 10:50 or 11 o'clock. How to Be Free from Loss, at 2:30. How to Be Free from the Past. And then at 4 o'clock, Embracing the Pain That Heals. And then also and then in between there is the fellowship meal. On Sunday, we have a seminar that is at 9 o'clock, Finding the Key to Victory, and also 10:45, Embracing the Love That Transforms. There will also be another meal on Sunday. So we have a full weekend, lots of fellowship, as well as a great learning opportunity. I have had the opportunity of hearing Dr. Sandoval on several occasions and listening to him online as well. And I have been greatly blessed and encouraged, and also feel like I have learned valuable information about how to live healthfully so that I can live happier and longer and walking deeper with our Lord. And so we want to do that this evening, and we would like to start tonight by just singing a short chorus, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. I asked Dr. Sandoval, I was like, well, I'd like to sing a song, but I don't think we have a pianist here. Does your wife play the piano? And he said, no, but I do. So we put him in double duty. So he's going to join us, and we'll sing Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. If you don't know the chorus, in your hymnal, it is hymn number 290, and we'll sing the chorus to that. Hymn number 290 in your hymnal. just the chorus. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Let's do that one more time. That's what we want to do tonight. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Just before I have prayer, I should have mentioned just two other things. We have a series of special study guides called Creation Life Study Guides. There are 8 in them, and this is the first one here. It's the Creation Life Bible-Based Studies for Achieving Optimal Health. The first one with C, standing for creation, is choice. And you are, if you would like one of these, you're welcome to pick up the first one there for our guests. There's a whole series that goes through CREATION. It's an acronym for obtaining a healthier life, how to be happier, to feel stronger, and experience trust in a new way. Wonderful Bible study guides. Also for our guests, if you don't have one, we have a special gift for you that is the Ministry of Healing. It's a wonderful book that goes through principles that are similar, really the same principles as the creation health, but explaining that in a wonderful way. Those are available for you. If you didn't pick one up, please pick one up on your way out, and you'll be blessed as you have read it. I've read that through on a couple occasions, and it has been a wonderful blessing in my life, especially the last section that deals with mind cure and in contact with others. So wonderful chapters that you will be blessed with, Bible-based and truth that you will find that you can apply to your hearts and lives. Let's bow our heads for prayer as we begin this evening. Father in heaven, we are so thankful that we can come into your house to be able to learn tonight about how best to take care of this body that you've given us, and the mind that you have so incredibly created. And we are here tonight because we want to learn. We not want to only live longer and live better, but we want to live like Jesus. We want this restoration of the image of God in man. That is the purpose of redemption and creation. And as we go through this series this weekend, Lord, we are asking for your presence to be with us, to speak to our hearts, and to guide us into a deeper understanding of this physical being that you created, but also of the relationship that it has to our spiritual natures that you have placed within us. Because when you created man in the Garden of Eden 6,000 years ago and then rested, and you created this body and this mind with such an incapacity that it was created in your image. And although sin has defaced it, and that we see the effects that sin has made in our own hearts and lives and in the world around us, we are asking that tonight you might give us glimpses of how that restoration process can take place. We can find healing from disease that we face, both of mind and body, and that you would bless us through Dr. Sandoval as he shares with us. I thank you, Lord, for him coming down and sharing with us. He's an international speaker living in Missouri, and we are so thankful that he's here this weekend. Please send your Spirit to bless our time together, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Just before Dr. Sandoval comes up, I should mention he's the director, and I asked him, what else he did. Well, he said he's the speaker, the writer, the accountant, and the bookkeeper, and the mop, and the custodian, and everything for the ministry. So he has this ministry that he has started called New Paradigm Ministry. He has several books that he may tell you more about, but we're so thankful. They live in South Central Missouri, and he and his family, his wife is here, 2 of his children, of how many? 6 children. So 2 only. There are only 2 here. I only see 2, but I didn't know if there are others around. Only 2 came with them, so we don't get the privilege of meeting the other 4, but they're a wonderful family. Met them on numerous occasions and always been blessed. Dr. Sandoval, we're so thankful you're here.
On is a good thing. There we go. All right. Thank you, Rob. Hello. It's good to be here. And it's good to be here and not be alone. Again, my name is Mark Sandoval, and it's a privilege to be here with, yes, my wife and 2 youngest ones. The others had to take care of dogs and cats and bunny rabbits and chickens and garden and so on. So we've gotten to an age when we have so many things that we just can't everybody go at the same time like we used to before. But we're grateful to be here with you and to be able to share this time together. And I guarantee the weekend will be challenging and a blessing as well, very much so, because as the ministry title implies, New Paradigm Ministries, I'm going to attempt to take your paradigm and turn it around and upside down, because if we see things the way that we've always seen them, then we're going to look for the same solutions that we've always looked for but haven't worked. And if we are going to find something that truly works, then we need to have a paradigm, an understanding that meets that what we need and our function so that we truly can be well. And being well is not just what you put in your mouth as far as diet and so on, but being well is also what comes out of your mouth, what you say and how you say it. Being well influences every aspect of your life, and we're going to step on every aspect of your life this weekend, at least many aspects of it. And we're going to be covering topics that come out of this book, The Law of Life. And anyway, so let's dive in. I don't need to preface things too much. We can just get right into it. What's that? All right, kids, what is that? All right. So how many of you have seen a tree before? All right, that's good. How many of you saw a tree today? All right, good. Some of you didn't see trees today, so all right. All right, you see a tree. So trees are contain similarities to human beings. We're going to look at the tree in relation to health and how it relates to health. So when you have a tree and you walk up to a tree, what is the first thing that you notice? Leaves, trunk, bark. What's that? Fruit, all right, so if it's fruit season, it's got fruit and so on. Might be the shape of the tree and so on. What do you usually not notice about a tree when you walk up to a tree? The roots. Why? Yeah, because they're underground and we don't have a transparent ground at this time, so if you want to get to the roots, you got to dig. So let's imagine that you have a tree that has some bad fruit and bad leaves on it, and so they're kind of rotting or blackish or whatever. Is that a problem? All right, yes, it is a problem. And the question is, where is the problem? All right, where is the problem? All right, well, we can obviously say that, well, there's a problem right there because that's where the manifestation is, but is that the only place where the problem is? All right, so the fruit and the leaves on this tree analogy represent symptoms. Symptoms are things that you feel. Typically, we talk about symptoms in relation to things that you should not be feeling, like pain and itching and sore throat and runny nose and coughing and other things of that nature. We call these different things symptoms. Now, you can have good symptoms too, but we usually refer to symptoms when it comes to bad stuff and not feeling well. Now, if you have pain, is that a good thing or a bad thing? All right, so the answer is yes. That's a smart answer. So is it a good thing to have pain? All right, you don't feel good because something is not good, right? It's an indicator. That's right. So to have pain is not good, but to be able to have pain is good. Because if you don't have the capacity to feel pain, then you're going to do damage to yourself in a number of different ways. And all you have to do is look at a leper colony and see what happens to them after the infection eats up the ability of the nerves to be able to sense pain, and then what an individual does to themselves when they don't sense pain. So the ability to feel pain is something that's important. But how many of us like to have pain? Yeah, not so much. So let's say that you woke up one day, well, maybe it was the middle of the day or towards the end of the day, and you got this pain, and you got this stabbing pain just in the middle of your back right over here, and it's just stabbing, and now it's throbbing, and you can't get a comfortable position, and it's hard for you to move or turn. You can't lay down on your back in your bed, and you can't get sleep because it's just so painful. What are you going to do about it? What do most people do about it? All right, take a pill, right? So you got an ill, take a pill, and so you do, and it might take a little bit of the edge of the pain off, but the pain is really, it's still there, and it's really a bother, and you can't get to sleep, and it's still the same thing. So you end up, calling the doctor, and the doctor said no more monkeys jumping on the bed, right? Well, you shouldn't do that either, but so you're told, that, okay, well, let's give you something stronger. So you got your over-the-counter, but now you've given something stronger, but the pain is still there, and it's still bothering you. It hasn't gone away. So you decide to get a second opinion. So you go to another place, and guess what? They happen to actually do an exam. And they look at your back to try to figure out why it's hurting. And they discover there's a reason you have back pain, right? Because you happen to get in an argument with somebody, and while you turned around, they kind of got at you. So did the pill take care of the problem? No, the pill didn't take care of the problem. It's not going to take care of the problem. Now, if you had some kind of trauma of that nature, well, anybody happy that there is something that you can take to, kind of take care of some of the pain? Well, yeah, we're not denying that. But the pain medication is not going to take care of the problem, right? The underlying problem. It's just going to take care of your perception of the problem, right? And so when we have symptoms, the usual way that our healthcare system is set up is to deal with symptoms. And so we look at things from a symptom basis. And so if you've got runny nose, here's some runny nose medication. You got sore throat, here's some sore throat medication. You got a cough, here's some cough medication. You got some diarrhea, here's some constipation medication. I mean, to constipate you, you got constipation, here's some diarrhea medication, and so on. So you have all of these different things that you can take from a symptom standpoint, but does it fix the problem? Well, no, it doesn't fix the problem, because the problem is deeper than that. Now, can you have bad fruit and bad leaves if your branch is doing perfectly well? Not unless it's attacked from the outside. Right? But from the plant itself, you're not going to get bad fruit and bad leaves from a perfectly good branch. So if you've got bad fruit and bad leaves there, then that means that the branch is bad. Right? And the branches, well, they are going to represent something else. But your symptoms are like a fire alarm. The fire alarm, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, all right. So the function of a fire alarm, is it a good function or a bad function? It's a good function. But when it's functioning, does that mean that something's good or something's bad? Something's bad. So it's a good function to let you know something's bad, right? There's a fire that's going on. So the problem is not the fire alarm, the problem is the fire. But what if your response to the fire alarm is to put a pillow over the fire alarm so that it's not so loud and annoying you so that you can go back to sleep? But it won't stick there, so you got to get some good duct tape and tape it down so that you can then go back to bed and go back to sleep. Is that a good plan? Not a good plan. Don't suggest it. Right? It's not a good plan. Because the fire alarm is not the problem. It's intended to be annoying. Right? Fire alarms are intended to be annoying. There was one day where we were at Uchee Pines, and we were in our house, and I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember hearing a fire alarm. And it wasn't in our house. And so I went out and I was like, where's that coming from? And I started wandering around a little bit, and the closer I got to our neighbor's house, the louder the sound got. I was like, oh, I wonder. And I went there, and I walked, and I knocked on the door, and there's nobody. And I opened the door, and smoke starts pouring out. And I'm like, so I ran in to find out what's going on, and something was baking in the oven. And nobody home. And it went beyond baking. And so, but it was a good thing that the fire alarm was going off, and the closer you got to it, the more annoying that it was. But it was a good thing that there was a fire alarm, or else who knows what would have happened to the home otherwise, right? So fire alarm's not the problem, the fire is the problem. We need to deal with the fire. But the problem is not just in the leaves and the fruit. It goes deeper. It gets into the branches, and the branches represent our behaviors. Right? And simple things like breathing and drinking and eating and so on. Right? Those are the different behaviors that we have. Now, if your behaviors are good, are they going to support good fruit and good leaves, good symptoms? Well, yes, it'll lead in that direction. If the behaviors are bad, is it going to lead in the direction of bad fruit and bad leaves? Yeah, sure. So there is association between what we do and how we feel. There is, right? And so it's helpful to have good behaviors because that's going to lead to good fruit and good leaves on the tree. But does the branch grow from itself? No, what does it grow off of? The trunk, all right? So the trunk represents our needs. Right? This is what you need. What do you need? Okay, you need water, yeah? What else do you need? Rest? Wake me up in an hour and a half, yeah? All right. So yes, we need water, we need food, we need oxygen, we need rest, right? We need these various different things. Now, everything that you need because of what you are, right? How many trees need rest? I mean, how many trees have you seen taking a nap? You don't know. Maybe they're sleeping the whole time. Right? But rest is something that we need as a human, and a lot of the animals also need rest, but we're not sure exactly whether plants need rest or not, right? But we need oxygen. We definitely need oxygen. Do the plants need oxygen? No. They need carbon dioxide, right? So what you are determines what you need. Since we are human beings, then as human beings, we have certain needs. And how many human beings have the same needs? All of them, right? So is there a human being on this planet that doesn't need oxygen? Doesn't need water? doesn't need food, doesn't need the same things that everybody else needs? No. If you are a human being, you have the same needs because you are the same species. Thank you. Right? So your needs are because of what you are. Right? That determines what you need. But everything that you need, where do you find it? Do you find it inside of yourself? Or do you find it outside of yourself? Well, outside, right? So the oxygen that you need in order to live is outside of you. Now, if it stays outside of you, what's going to happen to you? You're going to die. What if it's even close to you? It's right there at your nose. You're still going to die, right? Because you don't live if it stays outside of you. You only live when it comes inside, right? And becomes a part of you. Now, the same thing is true for the water. If the water stayed at your lips, you would die. And you're only going to live when that comes in, right? And so everything that you need because of what you are, and everything you need comes from outside of you and must be brought inside of you in order for you to live. So who is it that does the bringing in? Does the oxygen blow into you so that you can breathe, so that you can live? No. What do? You breathe. That's right. Does the water squirt into you so that you can live? No. So you have to do what? You've got to drink. Does the food crawl down your throat? You sure hope not. Or else you were sleeping with that, that. And that spider thought, ooh, look at that. Right? Yeah, no, all right, bad scenario. All right, well, we won't go there. All right, so does the food crawl into you? No, not usually. You got to eat it. That's right. These are basics, and we need to get the basics down, right? So everything first takes what it needs and brings it in, right? Everything takes what it needs and it brings it in. But how many of you have kept every bite of food you ever ate? No? How many of you kept every drink of water you ever drank? How many of you kept every breath of air that you ever breathed? No? Nobody? If you did, would you fit through the door? Probably not. Would you fit in here? I don't know. I mean, food-wise, yes. Water-wise, probably. For an individual and how much they can eat and drink for their lifetime, but how much you breathe? I don't know. I'm not sure you would fit in here, right? So everything takes in what it needs, but then it gives away. You give away everything you take in. It's just on a timeline, right? You might think, oh, no, I keep some of it to myself. Well, it's true for a little while, but you're going to keep it when you die? No. Everything you take in, you then give away. Right? Everything you take in, you give away. And it's true for everything. Everything has needs, and everything takes in what it needs, and everything passes along what it needs. Right? Not just living things, non-living things as well. So you need what you need because you are what you are. Everything that you need is outside of you, but it must be brought in, and that is your behaviors, your actions, right? So you breathe because you need oxygen. You drink because you need water. You eat because you need food. The actions are there in order for you to take what you need and bring them in so that you can live by it, right? And if your actions, your behaviors match your needs, well, that's going to result in good fruit and good leaves. But if your behaviors do not match your needs, well, that's not going to work out so well, right? It's not going to work out so well. Can you change what you need? No. No, it's fixed. So, the teeter-totter, and it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and, sometimes you try to bounce somebody off, the other side of the teeter-totter. You don't do that on the playground, do you? No. I didn't do it when I was young either. Anyway, so you got that teeter-totter that goes up and down, up and down. That point that doesn't move, it's called the fulcrum. That's where everything else moves around. When it comes to us and it comes to our health, the fulcrum is your needs. They never change. They're the same. But your behaviors can change. Sometimes you can take in a lot more than you need. Other times you can take in a lot less than you need. Some other times you can take what you need. But your need never changes. Right? It's fixed. And so that matching the needs is really important. And so we've been talking about things that are above ground. Now we need to get below the ground because the trunk doesn't grow by itself. What does it grow off of? The roots. And the roots represent our beliefs. You don't automatically know what somebody believes. You've got to talk to them. You've got to dig. You've got to, have a conversation with them. You've got to find out what their ideas and so on are. And it can take a little time for that to happen. Why are beliefs important? Well, you will do what you believe. Your beliefs will manifest itself in your behaviors. In fact, your behaviors is not something that's just automatic. Your behaviors are based off of your beliefs. Right? So let's say, for instance, you believe that you need Dr. Pepper. Anybody here need Dr. Pepper? No. But if you believe that you need Dr. Pepper, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to drink Dr. Pepper. Right? Now, if you take it in but you don't need it, and you then supply what you don't need, is that going to work out in good fruit and good leaves or bad fruit and bad leaves? Bad fruit and bad leaves, because you don't need it. Right? Now, what if you need water and you don't drink it? Is that going to end up in good fruit and good leaves or bad fruit and bad leaves? Bad fruit and bad leaves. What if you think water is dangerous for you? You believe that it's dangerous. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to avoid it, and you're going to dehydrate, and there will be consequences associated with it. But what you believe, you will do. Right? It manifests itself that way. So is it important what you believe? Yes, it's important what you believe. And it's important that our beliefs match our needs. Because when our beliefs match our needs, then we will behave in such a way to supply our needs, then we'll end up with good fruit and good leaves. But if our beliefs don't match with our needs, well, then our behaviors are not going to supply what we need. It's going to oversupply something, undersupply something else, supply what you don't need, and then things are going to be chaos from that standpoint. But if you have a tree that has bad fruit and bad leaves, what are you going to fix? What are you going to fix in the tree? You fix the soil. Right? You fix the soil. You don't have to fix the tree. The tree functions how the tree is supposed to function. If it has what it needs. And the soil represents the source where you get what you need. Right? So what if the source where the tree is planted has too little of what it needs? Hasn't been raining, soil is dry, it's arid, doesn't have the water that the tree needs. Is that going to turn out well? No, that's not going to turn out well. What if it has too much? Now it's waterlogged and it's been raining like crazy and now you have a bog around the tree. Is that going to work well? Not really well, unless it's a cypress tree, They do well in water, but, so no, that's not going to do well. What if you go out there and you water the tree with diesel? Is that going to work out well? No, not going to work out well either. So if your source has too little of what you need, too much of what you need, or the wrong stuff, what you don't need, even if you believed correctly about what you need, and you were behaving associated with it, but you just didn't have access to it, or there was way too much of it, or you just, anyways, it was only the wrong stuff that was available to you, well, you're still going to end up with problems, right? So what you need is you need a source that has what you need in the quantities that you need it, beliefs that match with what you need, then behaviors that bring in what you need, and then you're going to end up with good fruit and good leaves. Make sense? Yeah. How many of you need love? Yeah? All right. Yeah. So, we need love because we're human beings, right? That's a need that we have. How many human beings need love? All of them, right? So everything you need because of what you are, but everything that you need comes from where? Inside of you or outside of you? Outside of you, right? So where is the love going to come from that you need? From inside or from outside? From outside, that's right. Now, you need oxygen so you breathe, you need water so you drink, you need food so you eat, you need love so you... What do you do to bring love in? Okay, go to somebody else. So let's say that you have a tree, and that tree goes to another tree. And it puts its roots into the other tree. And so now it starts growing from the other tree. And then another tree attaches to that tree and puts its roots into that tree. And then the next tree puts its roots into the next tree, and the next tree and the next tree, and every tree's roots are bound up in the roots in the other tree that it's associated with. How well is that going to work out? Yeah, they're all going to die. They're all going to die, right? So, if we go to another person for our love, is that going to work out well? Oh, I don't know. All right, so it might be a little early in the series to ask that question. All right, we'll have a definite answer by tomorrow. So, how do you get love and how do you bring it in? All right, so let's say that you were having a bad day and you came home and you stopped at the mailbox and you picked up the mail that was there, bill, not bill. Oh. And the not bill is handwritten and so on, and you recognize the name that's on there, and it's a good name. and so you open up the letter, leave the bills behind for later, and you open up the letter, and it says, "Dear so-and-so, I've been thinking about you, can't get you off my mind, remembering the last time we spent together, and so on, and I can't wait until I see you again, or that we can talk, and yada, yada, yada." And at the end it says, "Love, so-and-so." How do you feel after reading the letter? And it's the right person. Yeah, you feel loved, right? So you were feeling bad before, and after the letter you feel loved. What happened? How did that work? How did you go from feeling bad to feeling loved, and all you had was a letter? Okay. So how much love was in the letter? I mean, can you get a few chemicals and extract the love out of the letter? Can you measure and weigh the amount of love that's in the letter? Can you take apart the paper fibers and the ink and all that kind of stuff and find where the love is? Can you? No, of course not. Because love is not physical, right? It's not. So how'd that work? Well, that letter contains information. And information can be stored in a physical thing. And it can be transmitted in a physical thing, right? So you have information stored on a hard drive of a computer. That information is transmitted via electrical currents and so on through wires and whatever. So information can be stored in and transmitted in something that is physical, but information never originates in something that's physical. Right? So something physical can store and transmit information, but something physical can never originate information. So the information in that letter came from someone, a living, thinking entity. And what they thought, they put in ink on paper, and they communicated to you via information what they were thinking, and what they were thinking you interpreted to mean love. Now, if that letter came from the used car salesman downtown, then how are you going to feel after you read the letter? You know? Been thinking about you, can't get you off of my mind, thinking about the last time we were together and all that kind of stuff. Love, the used car salesman. How are you feeling after that? Yeah, let me get to the bills. All right. Did that help you at all? No, but same information. Same information, but it didn't help you at all. So what's the difference between the two? How come you end up feeling loved when it's one and you don't feel loved when it's the other, but it's the same information? You say it depends on the person. No, it actually doesn't. It depends on you, not them. Because they didn't come with the letter. You're the one that's extracting from the letter something. It depends on how you interpret it. That's right. If you interpret it to mean love and you believe it, then you bring it in, and now it's yours. If you interpret it to mean love, but you don't believe it, doesn't do you any good. If you interpret it to mean hatred and you believe it, then you take it in, right? No matter what it is, that's how it works. So, love, how you take it in, is a process of thinking. It's taking information, it's evaluating it, it's interpreting it, and then it's believing it. That's a process of thinking. So, you breathe to bring in the oxygen, you drink to bring in the water, you eat to bring in the food, you think to bring in the love. Now, what if you believe that people can be the source of the love that you need so that you can be full? Well, then you're going to plant your roots in people. How well is that going to turn out? Well, we'll find out through this weekend how well that turns out. Now, everything that functions is governed by law. Laws govern everything that functions. And all laws that govern function are unchangeable. Praise God for that. It's a good thing that laws that govern function don't change. Because if they did, imagine what it would be like if you were landing in your airplane from your trip, and all of a sudden the law of inertia changed, and now instead of needing a runway that's however many thousand feet long, you need a runway that's about 5 miles long before you stop. But the runway is still, thousands of feet long and not miles long. Well, you got problems, right? And if the laws of aerodynamics all of a sudden changed, And the weight to lift ratio is not the same while you're flying along. Now all of a sudden, you've got a big beast of a plane plus you sitting on it, and now if it goes in one direction, now you start going, whoa. And if it went in the other direction, then you go, whoa. Right? That wouldn't be good. What if you woke up one day and gravity was all of a sudden backwards? And you fell out of your bed up. And you landed on the ceiling. That wouldn't be good. Right? And then all of a sudden gravity turns sideways and whoa, over there. It wouldn't be good. All laws that govern function are fixed. They stay the same. They don't change, and that's good that they don't change, right? And proper function is only maintained by staying within inside the law. Dysfunction happens when we go outside the law. That's where dysfunction happens, outside the law. And when we talk about law, we need to understand that there is a fundamental law of all nature. It is applicable in each and every circumstance. It doesn't matter where you're at, under what circumstances you are in, it still is functional and applicable. And that fundamental law of nature has two components to it. One, nothing exists or functions from itself. And two, nothing exists or functions for itself. Nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists or functions for itself. That means everything has needs. It needs power, it needs material, it needs resources. It might need food, it might need water, it might not. It might be in a different form. But you need some kind of resource, you need some kind of power that is outside of yourself that must come in order for you to function. But you don't keep it to yourself, you pass it along. And what you pass along, something else uses in order to function by as well, right? That's the fundamental law. In other words, everything takes to give. Everything takes to give. And from this, we get things like thermodynamics that tell us that all energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside of that system, right? No system generates all the energy that it needs in order to continue its own function. That would be a perpetual motion machine. No such thing, right? And from this comes the law of cause and effect that tells us that every effect must have a cause, because the effect can't produce itself. What was needed for the thing came outside of the thing in order to produce the thing, right? And this law is the law of life, and this is what we're going to be looking at a bit more through the weekend. Now, because everything functions by law, and laws don't change, and effect follows cause, and cause produces effect, is the bad fruit and the bad leaves, is that the cause or is that the effect? That's the effect. Now, is the cause going to be found up in the bad fruit and the bad leaves? No. The cause has to be found outside of there, because the power, materials, resources necessary for the effect had to come from outside of there. So don't ever look at where the problem is to discover why there's the problem, because the why always has to come from outside of there. It has to come from outside of there. All right? Now, if you successfully, let's say for instance that this represents pain, and you successfully take away the pain by taking the medication, but the cause still remains, what does the cause have to do now? It has to produce another effect in order to manifest its presence. It has to produce another effect to manifest its presence. So if you take any treatment, whatever it is, I don't care how you're treating it, if you take any treatment that takes away the effect but does not deal with the cause, and it successfully removes the effect, then it must create side effects by law. By law, it must create side effects, the law of cause and effect. We don't usually think of it. We think, oh, well, it's because I took this medication has these side effects. If you do studies and you use water, it has side effects. If you do studies and it's a placebo pill, it has side effects. I don't care what you use in a study, if it actually takes away the effect, but it does not deal with the cause, it has side effects because it's by law that happens. It's by law. All right, let me skip through a lot of this. We'll just summarize it briefly. All right, so health is, in this analogy, is like staying on the road. And when you're on the road, it's comfortable, things function properly. And there's certain things that you need in order to be healthy and to be on the road, like oxygen, water, and food, and warmth as well. And there is a law that defines your upper limits of normal and your lower limits of normal for everything. Everything. What's the upper limits of normal body temperature versus the lower limits? What's the upper limits for sodium levels versus the lower limits? What are the upper limits for potassium levels versus the lower limits, and so on? The law governs this, and you can't change the law. You can't. It's fixed, right? And it doesn't matter what part of the planet you were born on. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter how tall or short, how wide or narrow. It doesn't matter. If you are a human being, then the laws that govern each of the different things that you need is the same no matter where you live. Right? If you're a human, it's the same. And if you start getting away from the law, above the law, well, then you start having symptoms. That's like the rumble strips on the side of the road telling you, all right, get back on the road, right? But if you keep going, you're going to hit disease, and if you don't stop there, you're going to eventually get to death on either side. Whether your temperature goes up too high and you start getting hot, and then you start getting heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and then you eventually die, or your temperature goes down and you start feeling cold, and then you start having frostbite and chilblains, and then you eventually die on that side. It doesn't matter. You deviate from the law, it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to dysfunction. And the farther you get, the worse it gets. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Because guess what? You get warning signs along the way. What would it be like if you had absolutely no symptoms until death? No symptoms whatsoever. And all of a sudden, you feel good, but you're getting slower, and you feel good, and, okay, well, maybe even that's a symptom. Okay, so you don't even slow down. You're feeling good, you're feeling good, you're feeling good. You're gone. You're done. Not a single symptom along the way. Would that be good or would that be bad? That'd be bad. Be really bad. So it's a good thing that it doesn't feel good when you get off the road, and then it feels even worse the farther you get off the road, because it gives you a warning sign. Hello, you got a problem. Get back on the road, right? Get back on the road. Because you and I, we could care less about law. We don't care about law. What do we care about? We care about how we feel. We don't even care about health either. The only reason we care about health is because when we're healthy, we feel good. That's right. We care about how we feel. So, how you're actually doing in relation to the law is tied to how you feel, because you care about what you feel. You can care less about the law. All right, somebody tell me, what is the normal upper and lower limits for cadmium levels in your blood? Come on now. There's a law that governs that. Do you care? Yeah, I couldn't either. I can't tell you. I don't know what the numbers are. But there's a law that governs it. I can tell you sodium, 135 to 145 milliequivalents per deciliter. Potassium, 3.5 to about 5.5 milligrams per deciliter of potassium levels. Who cares? Until you get outside of the law, and then things start going awry. and now you don't feel good, and now you're concerned because you don't feel good. That's by design. Now, what if there was a law that governed the function of love? Oh. And if you got outside of that law, you started having symptoms, and maybe even disease. And if you went far enough, you died. Think that could be the case? Possibility, maybe? You know anybody that dies because of lack of love? Yeah. A lot of people. And it's been increasing significantly since these last few years. So health is proper function, which is the effect of staying within the law. And disease is dysfunction, which is the effect of going outside of the law. Right? So there you go. Right? Health is proper function because you're inside the law. And disease is dysfunction, which is going outside of the law. Right? So there we go, we got it defined. And symptoms and disease, well, they're like the fire alarm. They're like the rumble strips. They're there to let you know something's wrong. Their function is good, but when they get put into function, it tells you something's bad. Right? But their function themselves is good. So let's look a little bit more at the law of cause and effect. Now, if you have an effect, that means you have to have a cause. Now, there's got to be a cause. And if you have a cause, what is it going to do? It's going to produce an effect, right? Now, if your effect is present, what else has to be present? The cause, right? It's got to be there. Because if you remove the cause, what happens to the effect? It goes away. That's right. Now, there is no effect that can produce itself whatsoever because it's dependent upon power and materials outside of itself in order to exist or function. So you will never find an effect without a cause. Never. Never, never. That means that there is nothing, no such thing as chance. Right? Because chance is this idea that something can happen without a cause. No such thing. All right. And there's nothing that is truly random. Random is simply our inability to predict what's coming next. Right? So I'll take it on this authority. The wise man, Solomon said in Proverbs 26:2, says, the curse causeless, what? Shall not come. Curse causeless shall not come. The effect, that's the curse, without a cause will not come because there's no such thing. There's always a cause to every effect. Right? And we're also told that in the laws of God and nature, effect follows cause with unerring certainty. And the will of God establishes the connection between cause and its effects. Right? So that means who's in control of the effects? According to those statements. Who's in control of the effects? Oh, I heard it. God. That's right. Now, what is it that's unerring? God. So if effect follows cause with unerring certainty, then who is it that's making sure the effect is right for the cause? It's God. That's right. And if it's the will of God that establishes a connection between cause and its effects, then who is it that's in control of the effects? Who? It's God. What is he not in control of? The cause. He is not in control of the cause. but he is in control of the effect. Did God choose what you ate this morning? Or did you? Who chose? You did. But guess what? Depending upon what you chose, your blood sugar levels went up a certain degree, depending on what you chose to eat, right? And there are effects associated with what you chose to eat. God did not control what you chose, but guess what he controls? The effect. Because the effect is fixed by him. So if you eat a nice nutritious meal, your blood sugars don't spike so high, but if you eat a nice sugary one that's breaking down, absorbed really quick and so on, blood sugar levels go higher. And that'll have an effect over time. Yes. God made the association between the two, but he's not in control of the cause. He's in control of the effect. So what is it called when you break a law? All right, so a crime, right? So if you break a law, you're speeding or other things like that, then it's a crime. You have a misdemeanor that's might be worse than that, felony or other things of that nature. It's a crime. What if you break a moral law? What would we call that? Sin, right? So, breaking of a moral law is sin. What if you break a natural law? So it wasn't speeding. That it was a natural law that you broke. Well, which law is broken? If you're breaking law and it's sin. Who made the law? If it's a natural law or a moral law, who made the law that you're breaking? God. And if you break a law that God made, what do we call that? Sin. And what's the foundation of law that God makes? Which law is ultimately broken? So it's God's law. Right? And what is the foundation of God's law? It's love. That's right, it's his character. So, pay attention. Disease is the result of a love problem. Disease is the result of a love problem. Right? There is a divinely appointed connection between sin and disease. No physician can practice for a month without seeing this illustrated. If he will be observing and honest, he cannot help acknowledging that sin and disease bear to each other the relationship of cause and effect. Now, is this saying that it's necessarily your sin that caused your disease? No. It's just saying sin is the cause. Was there disease before sin? No. Right? Disease only came after sin, right? And, there's different examples that we have. Of course, Job. Did Job have a disease? Yes. Was it his sin? No. Whose sin was it? Yeah, Satan's sin. That's right. So it was still the result of sin. It wasn't Job's sin, but the disease came in as a result of sin. So let's get a little microscopic, and then we'll get a little bit more macroscopic again. So here you have a cell, and cells, they function according to that law of life, of taking to give, and they function kind of like a little factory, and factories, of course, produce products. Now, your function as a whole body is dependent upon the functions of your individual cells. And you have about 250 some different cells, different types of cells in your body. And as an adult, you have somewhere between about, I don't remember how many, 50 to 100 trillion cells or so, somewhere in that range. As an adult, little ones, you have less. And each different type of cell has different types of functions and products that it makes. And if you lose a particular type of cell, well, you lose that function as a whole in the body. One of the things that we know of, probably most commonly from that standpoint, would be like type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, you have an individual that develops an autoimmune condition. The immune system starts attacking the pancreas and starts killing off the beta islet cells or the beta cells in the pancreas, and the beta cells produce what? Insulin. They're the only cells in the body that produce insulin. So if you kill off all of the cells that produce insulin, guess what you don't have? Insulin. And go figure, you actually need insulin. And so if you don't have insulin and you need insulin, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to die if you don't get insulin, right? And so back in the day, before they figured out this whole insulin thing, type 1 diabetes was a horrible diagnosis because you died faster than you were if you were diagnosed with cancer. It was usually within days to a few weeks that somebody was dead when they got that diagnosis because they didn't have any insulin to give somebody, and so now no insulin, person dies, right? Thankfully, now there is insulin, and somebody can take insulin if they're not producing that insulin. Now, if an individual developed type 2 diabetes, well, it might take time between the initial cause and the manifestation. It can take time, right? So the cause will immediately begin producing an effect right away. The cause, once it's there, it'll just start producing the effect right away, but it might take time for the effect to get big enough in order for you to notice it, right? So let's say that your pancreas has 20 billion beta islet cells. I don't know how many it has. But we'll just say that it has 20 billion beta islet cells. And it's generally believed that you need to lose half of a cell population before you really start manifesting problems associated with it. Half of your liver cells before you really start manifesting liver failure. Half of your kidney cells before you start manifesting kidney failure, and so on. So about how many beta islet cells are you going to have to lose before you really start manifesting problems with this problem? Yeah, 10 billion beta islet cells. Now let's imagine that you have a process that begins right now and it starts killing off 100 beta islet cells every second. So you lose 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, so on. Well, that's going to kill off 6,000 cells in a minute, 360,000 cells in an hour, 8.6 million cells in a day, 60.5 million in a week, 260 million in a month, and 3.2 billion cells in a year. That process going on at that rate would take you 3 years, 2 months before you actually manifested the problem, to the point that you could notice it. But the cause was in place all along, right? Cause was in place all along. And some disease processes are faster. Ooh, it doesn't take very much time. And some are slower. It might just be seconds, minutes, or hours between the cause being in place and it being big enough for you to notice it. And other ones, it can take years or even decades, where the cause is in place before the manifestation is there and you really got a problem with it, right? Like diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It's usually about 10 years in the making before an individual really starts developing diabetes. It's been around for a while. Now, if you want to know what the cause is, it has to meet these 3 criteria. If you want to know what the cause is, it must meet these criteria. So if you're interested in dealing with the cause, pay attention to the slide. The cause must be in place before the effect was noticed. Right? Cause has to be there before the effect was noticed. So I always want to know from somebody who has some kind of disease or some kind of process or whatever, when was your first symptom of this thing? When was your first symptom? Because I know that whatever the cause is in your life, it had to come when? Before that. So if it was 35 years ago that you had the first symptom and you're 8 years old, then that would be impossible. But anyways, if you're a little older, and it was 35 years ago that you had your first symptom, well, guess what? The cause did not come 10 years ago. The cause was there at least 35 years ago, and it could have been longer. But it was at least 35 years ago. And if the effect is present, then the cause is also present. So if it is a disease process that is continuing, and it's been there for 35 years, guess what? The cause is still there. Because the disease process continues. So the cause had to be there before it began, and the cause has to still be here as long as the process continues. Right? And if the cause is removed, the effect must go away. Wouldn't that be nice, like with cancer? Remove the cause, and the cancer just starts going away. Right? Because that which is causing it has been taken away, and now the effect can't continue on its own, right? So we can apply that to any disease and any disease process. Now, cells, again, function according to that law of life, of taking to give, and cells need resources, and they need power. They need something to get the thing going and something to keep it going. They need a spark to get it going and fuel to keep it going, just like an engine does, right? You got to have something that gets the fuel going and something that is fueling it to keep the function going. And it's the cell itself that has to take those resources and that power in, but according to the law of life of taking to give, does it keep it to itself? No. It's going to give it away. It's going to pass it along. So it's going to produce something from that. Now, what is the fuel or the materials that the cells need to function by? All right, yeah, I've heard a number of different things. They all fit under this category of chemicals. Right? Chemicals. So cells require chemicals, nutrients, water, oxygen, so on. It needs chemicals in order to be its fuel, right? And that fuel is going to come from outside the body, and depending on the type of fuel will depend on which system it comes in. So the oxygen is going to come in through your respiratory system. Now, how many of cells in your body need the oxygen? All of them, but the oxygen is going to come into your lungs, right? So how are you going to get it from your lungs to your earlobes, the tip of your nose, the tip of your toes, and other places of your body? Okay, so you've got to have a transport system, and that transport system is the blood, the circulatory system. And of course, we're told in the Bible, Leviticus 17:11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, right? Life of the flesh is in the blood. Oh, good. So there's a statement made that many of you are probably familiar with. Perfect health. All right, perfect health depends upon or is dependent upon or requires or necessitates perfect circulation, right? Because you got to be able to get the fuel to the cells so that they can take in what they need. If the tank runs empty, well, it's not going to operate. It's not going to run. So you got to be able to have the materials, the stuff there so that it can function by. And if you have a good quantity, a good concentration of what you need, the cells can take what they need. If you don't have enough, well, the cells end up being deficient. And if you got too much, there's problems too, right? It becomes toxic. Now, not only do the cells need fuel, chemicals, resources, the cells also need something to ignite that fuel and to get it going, to get the system going. It needs power. So where are the cells going to get that ignition power? I'm not talking about the fuel power, but the ignition power to ignite the fuel to get it going. Where are the cells going to get that from? Inside of themselves or outside of themselves? Outside, right? Outside. So cells do function as electrical units. They will bring positively and negatively charged particles inside and outside of the cell membrane, and it will result in voltage. That movement is called current. There's resistance across the membrane. Those are all electrical terms. Cells function as electrical units, but they need chemicals as well, so they're electrochemical units. Now, how many cells in the body need to be regulated in their function? All of them. Where is the regulator in this thing? Where's the regulator of all of that function? Is it in your fifth toe? Is it in your kneecap? Is it in your elbow? Is it in your colon? Is it in your liver? Where is it? Yeah, it's right up here, right? It's right up here. It's in your central nervous system. So the nervous system is the power generator for the spark for the rest of the cells of the body for their function, right? It only represents about 2% of the body weight, but it takes 25% of the fuel. Because there's a lot of fuel, there's a lot of power that's going on here, right? And so it's got that electrical impulse that's sent down via the nerves to the different cells of the body, which release chemicals, and those chemicals are taken in by the cells, and then it regulates how the cells function. It can upregulate, downregulate, stop processes, start processes, and so on and so forth. Everything in your body is controlled through here, right? Everything in your body is controlled through here. Blood pressure, controlled up here. Heart rate, controlled up here. Respiratory rate, controlled up here. Electrolyte levels, controlled up here. Organ function, controlled up here. It's all controlled up here, right? Now, all energy necessary for a system to function must come from where? Outside that system. Where does the brain get the spark from? Outside of itself. So where does the brain get it from? What's the outside of itself, where it comes from? These are exciting things. All right, Creator. Okay. It comes from spiritual information. It comes from spiritual information. Now, where did the spiritual information come from? Oh, okay. If it's what you need, it came from God. Right? There's spiritual information out there that you don't need, and that came from another source. So the spiritual information, you are not just physical, you are spiritual as well. That has to be brought in through something as well that is spiritual, i.e. your spirit. So we're told how we're formed, how we're made, right? Genesis 2 and verse 7, for God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul, or a living being, right? So you don't have a soul, you are a soul, right? The soul is simply the combination of dirt and breath coming together. And of course, the dust or the dirt makes the body, the breath is the spirit, and the living being is the soul. It's the combination of the two. It's like a computer. A computer is made up of hardware and software. If you only have hardware, does anything function? No. If you only have software, do you have anything? No, not at all. You've got to have both. You only have function when you have both. If you have one, no function. Have the other, no function. It's only when the two come together that they have function. So it's only your soul. You are a soul, and it's only you who functions, but you are made up of two parts. Physical part and a spiritual part. Body and spirit, right? Now, when you put the software and the hardware together, does the hardware stop being hardware? No. And does the software stop being software? No. And they each have their individual components of the overall function, but there's no function if they're separate. And it's the same with us. Spirit separated from the body, no function of either, right? Only function when they come together, but when they do so, the spirit doesn't stop being the spirit and the body doesn't stop being the body. And they each have their different components of your overall function. Now, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And in creation, now I'm not just talking about the creation of man, but the creation as a whole, which came first, the physical or the spiritual? That's why I was trying to clarify. Not just creation of man, but creation as a whole, which came first, physical or spiritual? Because when we talk about man, well, he took the dust first, and then he breathed into his nostrils. But where did he get the dust from? He created it. All right, so who created? Well, God did. And what is God's nature? Well, yes, love. But Jesus tells us in John 4:24, God is spirit. And in John chapter 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and so on. And then it goes on to say that without him, nothing was made that was made, because everything was made by him. And he said, God said, and it was, and Jesus said, the words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. So God, who is spirit, spoke words that he says are spirit, and from that came everything physical, right? So it's the spirit that is first, the spiritual that's first, and the physical is the result of that, right? And so in us, it's the spiritual part of your being that controls and regulates the physical component, right? But it only works when it's together. There's no function if it's apart, right? None whatsoever. And we were created in God's image, and so it's that spiritual part that controls and affects the physical part. So that spiritual information is taken in through your spirit, made available to your brain, which then generates electrical current. That electrical current is carried down through the wires of the nerves and to the different cells of the body, which release chemicals, and the cells will take them in and utilize the chemicals and regulate the function of those cells, right? So it is the soul, which is the combination of your brain and your spirit that thinks, not just the brain itself. Right? Just like a computer, if you just had hardware, you would have no function. If you just had a brain, you would not be able to think. It is not the brain that thinks. It is the brain that is used to think. Right? You got to have it. And if you got the hardware of a computer and you put a bullet through it, well, would it work very well? Well, no. And if you put a bullet through the physical structure of the brain, is it going to work very well? No. Right? So you can damage it physically, but guess what? You can damage it spiritually too. Right? Most of us aren't thinking about that. Well, God said, let us make him in our image. And guess what? God is the God of truth. Right? He's the God of truth. So what kind of spiritual information do we need in order to function properly? We need the truth. That's right. So when the truth is the foundation of that spiritual information that's brought in by the Spirit, made available to the brain, and then through these different pathways, well, then guess what? The mind is able to control the different functions of the body the way that they're supposed to, and things function well. Truth is always associated with function. Truth is always associated with function. Guess what's associated with dysfunction? Lies. So if it's lies or error, that's the foundation of that spiritual information that's brought in by the Spirit and made available to the brain and then sent down via the nerves to the different parts of the body. Well, guess what? It's going to result in dysfunction. That's right, dysfunction. So, does what you think about and what you think upon have an impact upon how this thing functions? Yes, it does. Very directly through this pathway. Right? Now, is this the only way that dysfunction comes into the body? Is it? No, it's not. All right, so let's look at the different ways so we can discern whether it's a mind issue versus not a mind issue when somebody has disease and is struggling with it, right? Whether it's a truth or a lie that we're believing, that's the foundation of it, or whether it's something else, right? Now, we can have dysfunction because of inheritance, because you and I have blueprints in physical matter. It's called DNA. Right? We have genetic material, and that genetic material contains information, and that information is a blueprint for how the cells are to be formed, and what kind of cells are to be formed, and what order they're to be formed in, and where they're to be located at, and so on and so forth. So the DNA, the DNA is the blueprint. Anybody ever seen see a blueprint build a house? All right. If you want to build the house right, do you need the blueprint? Yes. And you should follow the blueprint. But have you ever seen the blueprint build the house? No. So it's not the DNA that builds the body. It's only the DNA that contains the information that is used to build the body, right? And if you have the wrong information and there's some kind of genetic malfunction that came from a prior generation, well, guess what? Now, whatever part of the building that piece of the blueprint was messed up, and it's used, well, you don't use every part of the blueprint for the bathroom, and you don't use every part of the blueprint for the kitchen, and you don't use every part of the blueprint for the stairwell, and you don't use every part of the blueprint for the roof, and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing with DNA. You don't use all of the information for every cell. Certain bits of information are for different parts of the building up of the body. So if you got the bad blueprint from a prior generation, then it's located in a gene, and a gene is going to control for the production or the use of a particular protein that's used by certain cells to do certain functions. And that defective gene was passed on to you when you were only one cell. You got half of the genetic information from dad, you got half of the genetic information from mom, it came together, you had a whole piece, and guess what? Part of it was messed up from the prior generation. And now you use that blueprint and that information to build everything in the body, but the blueprint's messed up in a certain part. Well, guess what? It's going to mess up that certain part when it uses the information of that blueprint. And all other cells are going to arise from that one cell, so therefore every cell has the defective gene. Every cell has the same bad blueprint. But not every cell uses every part of the blueprint, right? Only certain cells will use certain parts of the blueprint. But every cell of a particular type will use all of the same genes. right? Every cell of a particular type will use all of the same genes. So, therefore, if it's an inheritance problem, the defect will not be in part of or some of those particular cells. It will be throughout all of them. It has to be throughout all of them. For example, sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease. How many of the red blood cells have the problem? All of them. All of them have the problem. Not just a few here or there. All of them have the problem. But if you develop colon cancer, and the colon cancer began in a part of the colon, and then it started growing from there, was that inheritance? No, could not be. Cannot be. Because inheritance cannot lead to a problem beginning in a part of one type of tissue. If it's inheritance, you must see it throughout all of that type of tissue. Right? So if it shows up in all of that type of tissue, and it happens from little, right? Not later, but it happens from little, and it's throughout all that type of tissue, then it can be inheritance. If that's not the case, it's not inheritance. If you have arthritis and it affected your right knee first, and then it went to your left knee, and then it went to your elbows and your wrists and all that kind of stuff, and eventually it gets, you got it in most of your joints, but not all of your joints, was that inheritance? No, cannot be. Can't be. So remember that, keep that in mind when you think about different diseases. Could it be inheritance? Most of the stuff we deal with, the medical community tells us it's inheritance. Well, your parents had that, and then you have it, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's, it's genetic, it's inherited. No. Don't buy it. Now, if it's an inheritance problem and a bad blueprint, it's going to disrupt normal function. It doesn't create new function. It just doesn't work that way, right? All right, now we can have dysfunction because of environment. Now, when we talk about environment, we're talking about the fact that cells live in a certain temperature, they live in a certain pressure, and so on. What would happen if you put the cells of your body at about 10,000 degrees, surface of the sun? You think they'd work very well? No, because the environment is not right. And what if you took the cells and you put them under the pressure of a strong vice? Are they going to work well? No, because they only operate in a certain environment, a certain temperature, certain pressure, then they function well. And if you get outside of that, it doesn't function well. Like if you're working on the roof and you're hammering the nails, and you hammer the wrong nail, yeah, because that nail was not intended to function under that amount of pressure. So we're really talking about trauma, physical trauma, when we talk about environment stuff, right? So trauma, what it does is it takes normal structure and it damages it, so now it can't function the way that it's supposed to. And now you go, ow, 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 ow. And depending on how hard you hit the nail with the hammer, the wrong nail, depends on what kind of, how bad the dysfunction is and so on, right? And yes, environmental issues, trauma stuff can be localized. You can hit one finger, oh, ow, and all the other fingers are okay, right? So it can be localized. If the damage is beyond the capacity to heal, then the effect can be permanent. If you came down on that thumb with the hammer really hard, and you went boom, and something went boom, boom over there. Well, if it's a crush injury like that, they're not going to be able to sew it back on and so on and so forth. So you're going to end up a little nubby at the end, right? You're going to end up a little nubby. It's going to be permanent. You're not going to grow that thing back. But it shouldn't continue to dysfunction to cause you pain over a long period of time and so on, right? So smaller injuries that do remain permanent usually reflect a dysfunction in the healing process. For example, if you cut yourself and now you have scar tissue growth, and that scar tissue growth starts growing outside of its normal area and continues growing and turns into like a cauliflower on top of that, we might call that a keloid. Well, that's not trauma. That's poor wound healing. And so there's something else driving the healing process that's making it dysfunctional. Trauma is going to take existing function and structure and knock it off so that it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. That's what trauma does. Chemicals. Oh, you can have too much chemicals that you need. You can have too little chemicals that you need. Or you can have poison. That doesn't work, right? So poisons and venomations, toxicities, deficiencies, all of those are going to stop and disrupt existing processes, which are going to lead to dysfunction. They never create new processes. Anybody recognize this condition? Gout. All right, what's the cause for gout? All right, too much alcohol, too much fat, too much high-fat foods, other things of that nature. What chemical is involved in it? Uric acid, right? So yes, and if you take medication to decrease your uric acid levels, then the problem goes away. So obviously it's associated with uric acid, or the uric acid is the cause. Here we have a problem. What's the cause of that? Well, what's in there? Cholesterol, all right? So we say that cholesterol is the problem, right? Somebody's got high cholesterol, and then they start developing plaques in their arteries and so on. And so the idea is to lower the cholesterol levels and so on to help somebody so that they don't continue along with its process, right? Here you have somebody, and let's say that they have a left-sided breast cancer, chest cancer, right? That's there in the individual. So that might be associated with bratwurst and salami and other things like that. There's research that shows that processed red meats are a class 1A carcinogen, and there's as much strong evidence that they cause cancer as asbestos and smoking and other things of that nature. Right? So maybe they ate too much of that, and then they ended up having that problem. But a problem with that idea is this. Anybody know what that's illustrating? Diffusion, right? So you get something in a watery environment, and if it's kind of liquidy and whatever, and you put it in there, well, it'll eventually get out into all of that watery environment and get into an even distribution. If you had gout in your toe, in your left toe, as the picture is signified, if I wanted to know if your uric acid levels were high, I would go send you to the lab, but I would not tell them to take the blood from your toe. Why not? Because it doesn't matter where I get the blood from. I could get it from your neck. I could get it from your right arm. I could get it from your left arm. I could get it from anywhere in your body, and I can tell you what your uric acid levels are. Because in the cardiovascular system, the chemicals mix throughout. And they're all essentially the same level throughout. So if I had uric acid levels going high to that foot and that foot, but the problem's in that foot, can it be the uric acid? Can it? Is the uric acid saying, hey guys, we're having a party over here. Left toe, second joint. Let's come on, let's gather together and so on. Let's concentrate over here. Can chemicals do that? If you go down the beach, right? I mean, you look at this, right? How much cholesterol was in the bloodstream here versus here versus here? Same amount. But the problem's right there. Why? I mean, if it was just the cholesterol, it should look like this in the tube. But it looks like this. If you went down the beach and you saw that, what would you think? Look, the sand had a party and said, come on, guys, let's gather together and make a sandcastle. Is that your conclusion? No. What's your conclusion? Somebody used the sand to make the sandcastle. Right? So, when you ate the bratwurst and salami and hot dogs and all that kind of stuff, didn't it go to your right chest just like it went to your left chest? Yeah, so why'd the problem show up in the left and not the right? Is it just because of the bratwurst and the salami and the ham and all that kind of stuff that you ate? Can it be? No, can't be. Can't be. You see, chemicals can cause dysfunction in a certain type of cell first. You're iodine deficient, it'll hit your thyroid first because it uses it the fastest, right? But it should be relatively even across that type of cell, so it should show up like inheritance. Chemicals can show up like inheritance. It can be throughout a cell type or a tissue type, but it cannot be localized within that certain cell type. So if you have a nodule in your thyroid, is that a chemical? That's the cause. Cannot be. Is it inheritance that's the cause? Cannot be. If it's inheritance or a chemical, it's got to be throughout the thyroid or all of the cells of that particular tissue, right? So chemicals can be used as a part of a disease process, as a cofactor, just like sand is used to make the sandcastle. And when you remove the cofactor, so you take away the cholesterol, you take away the uric acid, you take away the bratwurst, salami, ham, and all that kind of stuff, well, it does an effect, right? And it starts taking the problem away. But did you get rid of the sandcastle builder? If you only got rid of the sand. And what happens when the sand comes back and the sandcastle builder is still there? And the process continues again, right? So chemicals do not cause a process. They do not create a process. They can be used as a part of a process, but they don't create it. And so we're left now with the mind. And the mind is phenomenal. Just amazing. You've got a little spot in your brain that's attached to a spot in your body so that if you were blindfolded and somebody was pinning the tail on the donkey and they got the wrong donkey, you would know exactly where they pinned you. Right? You know, and everything in your body is represented in specific locations in your brain. And the wires are all connected the way that they're supposed to as long as the blueprints were okay and the development process was going on. And guess what? You have a nerve ending that goes to that joint of your toe. It wasn't the uric acid saying, hey guys, let's have a party over here. It was a nerve sending a signal from that part of the brain to that part of the body saying, hey, and the living cells picking up that signal, concentrating the uric acid, and now you got gout. And why is it that you have cholesterol plaque here but not there and not there? Well, it's because you got a nerve ending that comes here. And that nerve ending is sending a signal. And it's picked up by your white blood cells, and they might have extra cholesterol in them, and they come out here to figure out what's going on, and they die, and they leave cholesterol behind. And so the problem is right there. But the cause was where? Up in here. And the cancer. Well, guess what? Why was it in the left chest rather than the right chest? Because you've got a nerve that's going to that particular location. And that nerve is sending a signal. And it's being picked up by the living cells in the area. And in combination with the bratwurst and the salami and the ham and all that kind of stuff that an individual is eating, and now it develops there in that location and it starts growing. And guess what? You cut the nerve going to the center of a tumor, it changes how it behaves. In fact, there's research that shows that every step along the way in the cancer process, nerves and their products are involved. So the mind can control processes. It can start, stop, increase, decrease them. It regulates everything that happens in your body. Its effects can be generalized, like the fight or flight response when the big dog chases you, or it can be very localized, like that spot of that artery in that part of your heart, or that toe, right? And the mind is the primary but not the only controller of cell, tissue, organs, and organ system function. And 90% of the time, a disease that an individual has comes from here. And it doesn't come because of truth. It comes because of error. Right? It comes because of error. And then finally, there's the enemy as well. Job, it wasn't his mind. It wasn't chemicals, it wasn't the environment, it wasn't inheritance, it was the enemy, and he was sick because of that. So these are the things that we need to consider when it comes to the causes of disease. Is it the mind? Is it the enemy? Is it chemicals? Is it trauma? Is it inheritance? If it's localized in a particular type of tissue, you've got one option. It's the mind. That's the foundation, right? That's it. Now, is it a chemical issue where you don't have enough of the chemical? Well, that could be the mind too, because guess what's in control of what you eat? It's your mind. And what's in control of how you absorb things? You thought it was your gut. No. Your gut's only the servant. It's the mind that's the controller. 9/10 of diseases have their foundation in the mind. And it's always in relation to error, but error that we believe is truth. And if you believe that somebody else can be the source of the love that you need so that you can be full, I'll tell you this right now, that's an error, and it will hurt you. And tomorrow we're going to get deeper into that. We're just scratching the surface right now. I know I scratched a long time. I apologize. But tomorrow we're going to get deeper. We talked about health now. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about our personal lives and so on and so forth. We're going to seek to understand how we function and why we function the way that we do. Because if we don't understand that, we will never get back to function. We'll just keep doing things the same way we always have, messing up the same ways we always have, dysfunctioning the ways we always have. We got to understand how it works, and we're going to understand how it works so that we can be free from the dysfunction by Sunday. Yeah, I like that. Well, let's pray. I'm going to let you go home because you need your rest too. That's one of the needs, and then we'll be back tomorrow at 9:30. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much. You are really an awesome God, and you have created us in marvelous ways. And Lord, help us to scratch our heads a little bit, think, seek to understand how we function, why we do the things that we do, so that we can understand how we can cooperate with you in being restored, so that we can be free of this stuff, and we can be joyful, and we can be loved, and we can be happy, and we can be healthy, and everything that you desired for us to be. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you very much. We'll see you mañana. Por la mañana.